Hello, Sam-ariffic science fans! Welcome to another Book Rambles video, a series where we take a little break from science to talk about my favorite books. Today we are talking about The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. But even since we're talking about in the series, I need to say, spoilers ahead, starting in 3, 2, 1. You have been warned. In the last battle, it's revealed that one of Narnia's rulers of the Golden Age has stopped believing in Narnia, Queen Susan Pevensey. But from a writing perspective, why? Her siblings, her parents, her cousin all died, and she was left to wander the world alone. Why? Today we're gonna unfold the world of Queen Susan's fate. People often say that the reason that C.S. Lewis made this decision was because he was being sexist. J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, has been a big voice in this claim, but that just isn't true, for two reasons. Lewis wasn't a sexist person, and the message people claim he's writing is just not what he's writing. Through the books, Lewis always has a 1-to-1 ratio of boys to girls as protagonists. Magician's Nephew, 1 boy, 1 girl. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, 2 boys, 2 girls. You get the point. The pattern continues right up until the last battle, when Susan is left out, making it 4 boys and 3 girls. And Lewis was actually writing for his niece, who was a girl. Now, to look at the second point, you need to keep in mind that the books were written to parallel the Christian Bible. In the last battle, when King Tyrion asks about Susan, leading to a discussion between the 7 friends of Narnia, this is said in the books. "Oh, Susan," said Jill. "She's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipsticks and invitations." Many people think that this is implying that a girl can't like both religion, which Narnia symbolizes, and material objects. But this isn't exactly true. First of all, C.S. Lewis lived through both world wars. Not being obsessed with wanting more material things was in his blood. But second, the Bible he tries to parallel says that you shouldn't like material things more than the things in heaven. Susan went ahead and let herself love material things more than what really mattered, Narnia. But people will still be quick to point out it's still a girl who fell into that trap, not a boy. This is true, but of all of the rulers of the Golden Age of Narnia, Susan was the obvious choice to have fall out if someone had to. Peter couldn't. He was the High King and was supposed to parallel the first Pope, who was also a guy named Peter. While Peter did deny Jesus 3 times, he never really stopped believing. It couldn't be Edmund either. He was a traitor who redeemed himself, and I don't think C.S. Lewis wanted the character to look bad. But Edmund already had 1 strike, 2 might make him look worse than the others. And it couldn't be Lucy. She was the one who had the most unshakable faith in Narnia. She was the first one to enter Narnia in the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the only one who could see Narnia in Prince Caspian. So Susan made the most narrative sense, and she happened to be a girl. So no, picking her was not sexist. But why pick anyone at all? As I have said, C.S. Lewis was a Christian man, an Anglican to be precise, and we know that he wrote Narnia to parallel the Bible. So when he wrote Susan failing to believe in Narnia, despite knowing that it was true, despite having seen it with her own eyes, he was trying to parallel the Christians who had turned away from God. Now, you could just leave it at that. This is just one slightly more unliked biblical parallel among many, many more throughout this series, but it goes deeper. C.S. Lewis was born into the Church of Ireland, but after losing his mother at age 9, he began to turn away from God, thinking, how could this God that claims to be so good let this happen? He became an atheist. At age 32, he had a chat with some other names you may know. J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Lord of the Rings, and Hugo Dyson, author of poetry and prose, and they convinced him to return to his faith. C.S. Lewis had lived through both sides of turning away from God, and for that reason he wanted to parallel that in the last book. And as I said, Susan Pevensey was the obvious choice. But there was one big difference. Lewis returned to his faith. Susan did not. In a letter Lewis wrote to a girl who wanted to know why Susan was left out of the last battle, he said he didn't think that Susan's story was over. He just didn't want to write the story because he felt it would be too adult for what he wanted to write. Susan became interested in other things too deeply and now needed to refine herself. So I do see why Lewis felt this way. So this is why C.S. Lewis wrote the book the way he did, and personally I think it makes sense. The biblical parallels were why he wrote the book, and this one is personal to him. But I don't think Susan's story ends forever with her, the 21-year-old, wandering the streets with her family dead. In a letter I just talked about, Lewis encouraged the girl to write the story herself and see what happened. I know the author died 66 years ago, so we won't know what really happened to Queen Susan. You can do the same. And now, like Narnia at the end of the very book we were discussing, this video has reached its end. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.